Okay, from beginning. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأنا Control P extend. Okay, stop. طيب, slideshow from beginning. All right. Can you see it, Said?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, duplicate. Now it's working, right? Said, can you see
Yes,
it?
doctor.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so everybody please pay attention. So last week we've done loops. We've done for loops. And we mentioned that for loops are count controlled loops. So by count controlled loops, I know how many times the loop will go. So 50 times, 100 times, and so on. So it's for finite number. There is another kind of loops. We call it the while loops. And here we call it conditional controlled loops. By conditional means that every time before iterating, I will check a condition. If this condition is true, I will go into the loop. Once this condition is false, the loop will terminate. It will go out of the loop. So the syntax for file for the for loop, for a real quick recap, for let's say C and T or whatever variable name. So this is your variable that iterates, and usually you have the command range. Let's say 50. And we have the bulk of statements that will be repeated. Or sometimes we call it I, sometimes we call it A. So this is the variable name where the loop iterates. And N is a keyword in Python, pretty much like for. And we have this range, and we've seen the range has 3 cases when you have it only with one number. So this one will create a list of values from 0 to 49. So basically, the value count will have values from 0 to 49. At the first iteration, the value is 0. Second iteration, the value is 1, and so on. And we've done the other 2 cases when you have initial value, final value, and we have it with the step. All right, for the while, the structure is like this. While, all lowercase letters, and we have a certain condition. And we have the colons. And if this condition is true, we will do the certain set of statements. However, there is always one key statement here within the body of the loop that will, let's say, terminate or cause the condition, this condition, to become false at a certain point. If this one is not there, you might stuck in an infinite loop. Infinite loop means that this condition will never become false. It's always true, and the loop will keep going forever. So in while loops, you will notice that there will always a line at the end or somewhere in the code, in the body of the loop, that will change this condition into false. For example, for while num is less than 100. So you check a value, a number, a variable, and you check the value of that variable if it's less than 100. Somewhere in the code, you will have num equal num plus 1, for example. Means that at each iteration, increase the value of num by 1 point. So initially, num should be initialized with a certain value, 0. All right, so again, we mentioned that last week. Arithmetically, this is incorrect, but this is not equality sign. This is an assignment operator. Evaluate this expression first, then assign it to this variable. So initially it was 0 plus 1. It will become 1. So here the value will become 1. Assign it to the variable num. So then while 1 less than 100, it is true. Go back here. Now this is no longer 0. It's become 1 plus 1. So the new value will become 2. And keep iterating until you reach the value 100. Then the value of num is 100. And you check, is 100 less than 100? False. We don't have the equality sign. So it is false. Then in that case, the loop will terminate. Again, this is one key line here. If you forget it, you will do, or you will be stuck in infinite loop. We'll talk about the augmented operations. All right. So the objectives of this lecture is kind of a continuation to what we did last week with the for loops. So actually, as I mentioned, F, for, and while, they were all part of the same lecture. So that's why here use selection statement and break statements to exit the loop. So selection statement should be there. And there is another way actually to get out of the loop. There is a keyword called break, and we'll see the use of this break. At the end of the lecture, we'll talk about the random module, basically a random number generator. Like you want a random value for a certain range from 1 to 10, for example. Okay, so the while loop can be used to describe a conditional iteration each time you check a condition. Example, a program's input loop that accepts value until user enters a sentinel that terminates the input. Now, in count control loop with the for, we know that this loop will run 50 times. This loop will run 100 times. In this case, I don't know how many times the loop will run, but I know that at some point, if my value is not within the range of values accepted, just terminate the code. For example, if you are inserting student marks and you don't know how many students in that class, typical example, we're running it with the while loop because you don't know how many students, but you know that if the mark I entered is negative or larger than 100, the loop should terminate because there is no mark less than 0 or larger than 100. Now, this value that will cause the loop to terminate, we call it sentinel value. So a sentinel value is a value that will cause the loop to terminate. And that value is like the same data type of the loop you are examining. For example, the marks, it's a number, it's an integer, for example. So the sentinel is going to be of the same type. So remember this word, sentinel. Sentinel is a value that will cause the loop to terminate. And it's the same data type of the number you examine. All right, so conditional iteration requires that condition to be tested within the loop to determine if it should continue or not. All conditional operators that we checked with the conditional statement F is there. So we have larger than or equal, larger than, less than or equal, less than, equal. Again, when you have two equals, that's a logical operator to check equality, and does not equal. Those are the logical operators we deal with. Okay, so the condition will be based on those. And if this condition is true, the sequence of statements will be there.
Does not equal. Sign of not equal.
It's exclamation mark.
Gotcha.
أيوة, exclamation mark. Okay, so to make it more clear. Now, improper use may lead to infinite loop. Again, there's always this extra line of code that you have to put it there to update the number you're examining. We'll see several examples on how to do the while loop. While loop is also called entry control loop because it depends on the values you enter. Sometimes you write a code to repeat a task. You are entering student marks. And when you enter the student marks, like every time you do an input. So it's an entry controlled loop. So you check the condition, and statement within the loop can execute 0 or more times. The only case of 0 when the condition is false. This is something, inshallah, we'll do it in Java in Introduction to Programming in flowcharts. This is the schematic diagram or the semantics of the while loop. But let's not, let's say, give it more time because you will do it later in programming in Java. All right. So here is an example, a code that does summation of numbers. And here you don't know how many numbers are there. Now, previously, and when the for loop, we said, well, sum all values between 0 and 5, and we did it with the for loop. Now here, you just add numbers. You just keep adding numbers. The only condition for you to stop adding numbers is when you put an empty string. Empty string, we talked about it. It's a special case, just double quotation, double quotation. There is nothing here, not even a space. So if this number you entered is not the empty string, it's a number, then it will do the addition. Once you put empty string, this condition will become false, or sorry, will let's say will cause the loop to terminate. So my condition, as long as my input does not equal the empty string, do the loop. So there you go. So this is the condition. So your case, if I ask you what is the sentinel value in this code, it is the empty string. It's the value that will cause the code to terminate. All right, so let's understand the problem. You are given a task to add numbers, keep adding numbers regardless, positive, negative. But once you put nothing, the loop will terminate. Remember the input command. What is the data type when you do input? It's a string. So basically I'm inputting strings. But when I input numbers, I need to do that data conversion. So that's why in the code, the first line, you do this data conversion. My input is data. Now the first value of my input is at the beginning. It's out of the loop. So we started with this. And do you guys remember this line of code? Always remember, when you do summation problems, you have to create a variable for the summation. It starts with 0. If you want to do products, the variable should be what?
1.
1. So when you do anything related to multiplication, you start with a variable that has a value of 1, and you just update that multiplication. When you do summation, you start with a value 0. Remember the example where I did like a basket and starts with 0, and every time you add to that basket 1 by 1? Pretty much the same here. So first, I need to initialize my summation to 0. Then I will input the value. Data equals, kindly input a number. And check, while data does not equal the empty string, I'll check the value I entered. Does it equal the empty string? If no, then I'll do the addition. So first check, is the data does not equal the empty string? In that case, it's yes. Then I will do the continuation. So I will do first data conversion. I need to convert that string into a number, this line here. And then I'll do the updates. Now we'll talk about this operator in a few minutes. I'll do the update, the sum equal the sum plus number. Now what is the value of number? Our number. The value of number is the data converted. So add this to this. So this one initially was 0. And let's assume as a user I put 5. 0 plus 5. Then the new value of the sum is become 5. All right. So I did the addition. Then enter again. Because I need to repeat entering data until I hit the empty string. So enter the data again. Input, enter a number, or just enter an empty string to quit. So you input a value. It will go back to the loop at the beginning. Check the value you input here. Does it equal the empty string? If yes, terminate. If no, then do the conversion, do the addition, enter again. Go back, check. If its condition is true, do conversion, summation, and so on. Last case, let's assume here I put the empty string. In this line, I put the empty string. So go back to the beginning of the loop while data does not equal the empty string. Now, what's the value of data? It's the empty string. Does not equal empty string, that is false, because it does equal the empty string. False, then that's it. It will terminate, it will go out of the loop, it will do the printing statement. So let's try this code and Spider. Let me just make sure that the recording is going on. Okay, Spider is there. So since it's a summation problem, I will start with the sum equal 0 and data equal You don't see it. Okay, my bad. Duplicate. Data equal input. Now enter a number to add, or to terminate. Okay, and that's it. While the data I did, the input, does not equal the empty string, so number equal float, because I'm doing general addition, it doesn't restrictly to be integers. Float of data, and that's it. The sum equal the sum plus number. And that's it. I did the addition. I will enter data one more time. Data equal, it's going to be the same exact command there. So I will copy it, input. And that's it. Now to go out of the loop, remember the indentation. As long as there is this white space before the beginning of each line, it means that this is the body of the while loop. Once I do this backspace, I went outside of the loop. So I'm ready to do the printing statement. So print the summation of the numbers is, and the sum. The summation, because my addition is in the sum. All right, so let's see. Is my code correct? Do I have issues? Let's see. Run. Okay, enter a number or to terminate. It doesn't show the double quotations. Why? Any idea? 1, 2. So it did work. But why is not showing these double quotations? You need to add the backslash, escape sequences, because I started my string here, and this will mark the end of that string, and I'm starting another string. Honestly, I was expecting an error, but it did concatenation in that case. So or space to terminate. So we need this and this. In that case, I'm gonna display the empty strings. Okay, also let's give it a new line or a tab to leave space between the text and the number I put. Okay, so let's run the code again. Now it display the string. So enter a number to add or the empty string to terminate. Okay, I forgot the letter E. Okay, so let's try 5. Or is the tab there? 4, 9. So I keep entering numbers, negative numbers. And once I'm done, empty string, enter, it finished. So I have 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 9, that's 18, plus 3, that's 21, minus 7, that is 14, minus 2, that's 12. And here is the output. Now, what is the goal of this while loop? At least for you to write the syntax. Now, in the exam, it depends. It's a problem related thing, but the least I'm expecting from you is to write a proper syntax for the while loop. What's later on is going to be just the logic. So in these kind of programming questions, the safe way is, if I'm asking you a summation, start with the sum equals 0. At least you will not have a blank answer. You will have an answer somewhere. And write the while, identify what is the sentinel value, and I'll write that clearly, like you keep adding positive numbers. For example, if this problem is only for positive numbers, what will be the solution? I'm adding only positive numbers. So what is the sentinel value in this case? Any negative value. That's the sentinel value, because it will cause the loop to terminate. So how to modify this code to just work on positive numbers? Okay, So we change the condition on the while, right? So do what? What change the condition? Greater than 0. Greater than 0. So what is the value I'm examining? What is the value? What is the variable I'm examining? Data. What is the data type of data? String, because it's from pure input. How to fix it? From the beginning, do the plot here. So I did data conversion immediately. I input the value and make it float. What is the other change I need to do? So this line is no longer necessary because my data has already been converted. And there will an error be there. Why? It says that this variable number does not exist because I just deleted it. So change it to what? Data, because this is the value that have my input. So let's try it. Okay, so 5, 4, 2. Okay, not supported. Data some. This is the one here. I need to do the conversion here also. Because the second time I input a number, like initially 5 worked fine, but when I input 4, this 4 was a string. So I need to do the data conversion here also. Okay, check. Now it should work. 5, 4, 2, 0. Should it work or no? 0 will terminate because my condition is larger than 0, not larger than or equal 0. So the 0 was enough value to terminate the loop. Is it clear? Okay. So this is the example here to add different numbers from the users. So slideshow from the current slide. Hopefully there will be no surprises. Yeah, there's always a line here to say duplicate sharing. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, slideshow from current slide. Duplicate. Perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned before last week, whatever we can do with for could be done with while, and the opposite. But there are problems that are easier to be done with for. If I know the count control loops, it's easier to be done with for when compared to while. So this is an example here of adding values from 1 to 1 million. So you just keep adding values from 1 to 1 million. So I know my loop will run 1 million times. So for I in range 1 to 1 or 1 million and 1, because the and 1 will be excluded. So in this case here, basically I'm starting adding numbers from 1 to 1 million, but this one, that's how many zeros are there? 100,000. 100,000. So this one here, as you guys remember, this will not be included. So just add all 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way to 100,000. So it's very easy to do this summation in a for loop. The sum equals 0 for count in range 1 to 100,001. The sum plus equal, let's talk about it for a few minutes. We've seen that the sum equal the sum plus count. This is what we used to see. Now, to avoid redundancy means that I'm repeating a certain task. I'm writing the sum twice. To avoid this task, just move this one and let the operation to be plus equal. So it's going to be the sum. The output is the same. Just instead of writing the sum one more time, do plus equal count. So they are both equivalent. The sum equal the sum plus count, equivalent to the sum plus equal count. Just a shortcut, is not a must. In the exam, if you do this, that's perfectly fine. Or this one is perfectly fine. Again, that's a technique to remove redundancy. However, if there is a question in the code that I'm asking you, like, what does this line mean? You should know. But if you are writing a code, this thing is optional. It's up to you to follow. All right, so this one was done 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 lines of code in for loop. Now the same task, I'm gonna do it with while loops. So I have the summation, starts at 0. It's the same line here. Now I need to initialize my counter because now it's a count controlled loop. Previously, when it was conditional controlled loop, there was no issues there. But now it's count controlled loop. I need to initialize my counter at 1, the value here. Now examine. Does this count less than 1 million? Sorry, 100,000, less than or equal 100,000. And notice here, because I did the less than or equal, I will exactly write 100,000. If it was without the equal, I will make it 100,001. All right, so while count less than or equal 100,000, do the summation, the sum plus equal the count, the same line here, and update the count. You need to update the value of the count. Initially it was 1, it will become 2, then it will become 3. So you will do this line, count plus equal 1. This is equivalent to saying count equal count plus 1. You are updating the counter. And that's it. Go back, check, and iterate. Check, iterate. Once you are done, print. So how many lines of code here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So what was done in 4 lines in for loop could be done in 6 lines in while loop. Both of them will lead to the exact same answer, but one of them was more straightforward than the other. Okay. Do you know why I did not count this line as part of the code? Any idea? What makes it when you have this hash sign? It's a comment, so it's not does not add value to the code. Compiler immediately will discard this line. All right, augmented assignments. So we've seen an example with the plus equal. This is applicable for all arithmetic operations. Plus equal, minus equal, when you do subtraction, multiplication, multiply equal, divide equal, modulus, and so on. So here, for example, you start with these two variables, a equals 17, s equal high. So a plus equal 3, you started with a equals 17, you add 3, so you make the variable a equal 20. So this is equivalent to this line. A minus equal 3, that's the equivalent line. Similarly for multiplication, division, and what do we call this line? Or this operator? Modulus. It will find what? The remainder of division. Okay, this one here will do concatenation. Why? Because S is a string. So S equal high, then S plus equal there. So it says that high plus there, high there. So this is just a concatenation. Why concatenation? Because this is a string. So the plus sign, if it's between number and number, that's addition. Between a string and a string, it's concatenation. So this plus sign is a concatenation operator. And we talked about concatenation, I believe, in lecture 1 or 2. All right. So sometimes while loop are not, very straightforward to write. It might get complicated. For example, here, when we did this, like I know my sentinel, my counter here, that I'll keep increment the counter until it, let's say, reaches the 100,000. So let's look at this example here. The similar example, the previous example where you kept adding numbers, you just add numbers, add numbers, add numbers until you hit the empty string, and then you leave. So there is another way to do it with a while loop. Here, you do not examine So you do not check for the empty string. You run an infinite loop. Now, when you run an infinite loop, somewhere in your code, there should be a special word to terminate the loop. That special word is break. Break the loop. Break. So this break will be within a condition. Remember that condition that was within the while? It will become a pure if statement. So in this case, you have the sum, and while true, so already gave you the answer. There is no condition. Because you remember, while data does not equal empty string, so this will return either true or false. Now, in this case, while true, when you have while true, that's what? Infinite loop. And that's always going to be infinite loop because there is nothing will change the value of true. It's a value, true. Remember, Boolean values have only two values, either true or false. So this will remain true forever. And that's why the loop will run for infinity. Now, in this case, my loop runs for infinity. I will do the check. First, I will input my data. Data equals input value to add. And examine. Does this one equal the empty string? If yes, break. Go out of the loop. If no, continue. Do nothing. So here, data equal input, enter the number just or just enter to quit. And just enter to quit means the empty string. Now, if data does equal the empty string, in this case, if yes, if this one returns true, break. What does break do? Ignore the rest of the lines and continue to here. Go out of the loop. Just ignore everything after. Go leave the loop. And that's it. Print the sum equal, or the sum is the sum. So what was the initial value of the sum? 0. Now this kind of code solved a small problem. The problem was, in this example, how many times do I need to write the input data? Twice. So at the beginning, I started with the sum equals 0. I input a value, and then I did the examination. And this code, I don't have to do it twice. I will do it only once. So while true, infinite loop, input your data. If this data equals the empty string, leave the loop. If no, continue. Now remember, like the else statement is optional. Like you can put those within the else statement, but it's optional. All right. So if data does not equal the empty string, that's it. Don't execute this break line or break command, and continue. Number equal float data converted into a number. The sum plus equal number. Do the summation and leave the loop there. So let's try the code or update our previous code. Okay, so let me duplicate. Okay, so go back to Spider. Okay, so I have the code. I'll start over. So the sum equals 0. And we did mention now I'll start with an infinite loop. True is a keyword in Python. And T should be uppercase. Lowercase t will lead to an error. So T should be uppercase. And you'll notice by the change of color. So while true, I initiated an infinite loop. Now, if, or I will do the input now, data equal input, enter a number, or the empty string to quit. Okay, now if data does equal the empty string, break. And that's it. Leave the loop. And then we'll do the conversion. Number equal float data. And the sum equal the sum plus number. So I did it the classical way, or we'll do it with a shortcut way. plus equal number. And that's it, you are done. Go out of the loop, print. Okay, summation is the summation is the sum. And let's see here. 5 to 4 and nothing. It did the summation. 5 to 7 plus 4, that's 11. Again, that's strategies. In the exam, there is no restriction. As long as your code, to me, makes sense, there is logical flow, you will be rewarded. Typos, I might not like, I'm not picky on typos. For example, a lot of students by mistake will use input with an uppercase I. It's no big deal. Like some minor typos is fine. Like true here should be uppercase, but yeah, if it's like lowercase, it is fine. Again, the important part to me is the logical flow. You did it this way or the previous way, that's still fine. Okay. I show from current slide. Duplicate. Okay, so within this body, the input data is received. It then tests the loop termination condition and one-way selection statement. So the break statement will cause the exit from the loop. And remember that the break has a special purpose. It's a keyword in Python. It will cause the loop to terminate. Another example here modifies the input section of the grade conversion program, continue taking the input numbers from the user until entering an acceptable value. So you start with an infinite loop. And number, integer, input, enter the numerical grade. If number larger than 0 and number less than 100 to check if the grade or the mark is valid, then break. Else, print error grade must be between 0 and 100. So that's just like an example to check if the grade is valid or not. Okay. Now, random numbers is a very, there is a very common task in most programming languages, like random numbers. For example, like you play a game, guess the number. I will do it right now. So Python, like all other programming languages, there are special commands for random numbers. For random integers, there is a command rand int. Pretty much like pi, what square root. Random is not purely built into Python. You need to call a module for random numbers, which is like the module name is random, import random. So here you do import random. And then this is an example for rolling a dice. When you roll a dice, the dice has how many values? 6 values, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 6. So this one, you are assuming you are rolling a dice 10 times. And each time you just display the value. So for roll in range 10, so you're rolling a dice 10 times, print the value, the outcome. So print random rand int, and my range of values is from 1 to 6. So that's the syntax for the random 1 to 6. And equal space to display them in horizontal line. If you don't have this line, it will display them in vertical line. If you don't have this, it will display them in vertical line. So let's run this code real quick. So I'll do it here. So import random for roll in. Oh, you don't see. Yeah, my bad. Duplicate for roll in range. Okay, 10 times. Print random dot rand int 1 to 6. And that's it. I will not do this horizontal line thing. So let's run this code. And each time displays a random value from 1 to 6. So in this case, most of the values were like 5, 1, 3, there is a 2, 6 was not there. Let's give it another try. Now we have the 6 appears there. So every time you display a number from 1 to 6. Yeah, it's not like range. It's different than range. To make it in horizontal and equal space. Similarly, like this, where you have it. Okay. Okay, slideshow from current slide. Duplicate. Okay. So that's it about random numbers. Now this is the game of guessing. So the game is basically guess a value from 1 to 100 or guess from any values as user inputs. I want to do it because this is a task specific code. So import random to import random to get random numbers. So this is your smaller and larger bounds, like guess a number between 5 and 10. So you put 5, you put 10. And then you do this number. This is the number you need to guess. My number is random dot rand int smaller to higher or smaller to larger. So for example, I put 10, 30. And this one, the value will be 26. It's a random number between 10 and 30. Now here you initialize a counter just to show how many trials it took you to find the correct number. While true, you keep guessing. You don't know how many times you need to guess. So you start with an infinite loop. And remember, with an infinite loop, you need what? What command that will terminate that loop? Break. So I'm expecting a break there because there's an infinite loop. Okay, so the first trial, count plus equal 1. Now user number, the user will input a value. If user number less than my number, you can say, oh, your number is too small. If it's larger, you say it's too large. If it's neither smaller nor neither larger, what is then? This else means what? It is that number. Because initially you check if it's less than number, you say, okay, your guess is smaller. If it's the user else if user number larger my number, you give a hint, oh, your guess is larger. Else means what? It's not smaller nor larger. In that case, that is the number. So you say, congratulations, you got it, count tries, and you break. This is a very key word here. Otherwise, your loop will be infinite. And that's it. So when you run the code, it will be like this. So enter a smaller number 1, enter the larger number 100. So enter your guess, 50. Well, it's too small. You enter another guess, 75. It's too large. And you keep guessing until you reach 65. Then that random number is 65. Congratulations. So this is just an application of random numbers. You don't have to, let's say, understand this implementation. Again, it's case specific for an example of guessing a random number from 1 to 100. Okay, so what is the common error here when we deal with while loops? When you're stuck in infinite loop, or we don't have that proper update line, because like you forget the loop, the break, or you forget the update line for the counter. So you might stuck in an infinite loop. And for loops, what was the common error? Yeah. In for loops, there was a common error. In the range, if you forget that this range 1 to 100, that 100 will be eliminated as 99. But I want to include the 100, so I make it 101, right?
Right.
Yeah, so what do you call this problem? Let's say you are incorrect by 1, right? We call it off by 1 error. Both of them are logical errors. Actually, this one is not logical. That's a runtime error. Infinite loops are a runtime error. Because your code is fine, but due to certain reason that your code will keep going for infinity. That's a runtime error. Logical error will give you a wrong answer. But this one, it will not give you a wrong answer. You're stuck in infinite loop. Now let's assume you're running a code and you're stuck in infinite loop. How to get out of it? Two ways. Control C, that will get you out of the loop, or from Spider itself, you hit that red square. It will terminate the let's say the operation. So let's see an example here. Okay. So for example, while true, print one. So I'm printing one infinite times. So here run, and you notice it's running. It keeps printing once. So I'll stop it. Control C. Control C. Terminate. That's it. The other one is this red one. It means interrupt kernel or stop it. Both of them will do the same thing. That's when you are stuck in an infinite loop. How do you know that you are stuck in an infinite loop? You keep seeing the same thing infinite times. It's never stopping. Okay. So common errors when you incorrectly initialize the loop, failure to update the variable correctly within the loop, and failure to test it correctly in continuation condition. To hold the loop, Control C, and if the loop must run at least once, use a while true loop with delayed examination of termination condition. Ensure a break statement is there in the while true. So in summary, conditional iteration is the process of expecting a set of statements while condition is true. Use while loop, which is an entry control loop. Okay, a break can be used to exit the while loop. Usually we do it with an infinite loop when we do while true. Now, any loop could be done with either for or while, but some of them are easier to do with for, some of them are easier to do with while. So any for loop can be converted to an equivalent while loop, but let's say, might not be straightforward. We've seen an example in for loop, we've done it in 4 lines. In while loop, it took us 6 lines. And I'm talking about a simple application like addition. Some more, let's say, codes are more complicated. Okay, the infinite loop, the continuation condition never becomes false and no other exit points are provided. To create a random integer value, this is the syntax. First, you need to import the random module, import random, and the syntax, the module name dot that command that you desire, rand int, and you need to put the lower and upper limits of your random number. And that's it for this today's lecture. Okay, next week, inshallah, will be our midterm exam. So let me stop sharing. Okay, stop sharing. Stop recording. Okay,